Well, good evening, folks. We're so glad that so many of you could join us tonight as we present this year's Maine History Maker Award to the Chinket family. My name is Steve Bromage. I'm the Executive Director of Maine Historical Society, and we're thrilled to have you here. Before we start, though, I have to make the key announcement. I gather somebody has lost a set of car keys, which are back by the recording studio in the back of the room. So if you're missing your car keys, they've been found, and that's where they are. Okay. This event is truly one of our favorite evenings of the year. It's a wonderful reminder that each of us shapes and will be part of history one day. I'd like to make a quick note and an invitation. At the conclusion of the program, we're going to invite all of the Chinket family members who are with us tonight to come up on stage for a family photograph. So please stick around at the end. I'd like to just take a minute to thank our sponsors. Their generosity and enthusiasm for the Chinket family has been truly remarkable. A special thanks goes to Chinbro, our lead sponsor. Chinbro is, of course, intimately involved in the story we're telling tonight. Thanks to our sponsors, Eastern Maine Healthcare System, the Libra Foundation, our supporters, Gorham Savings Bank, Key Bank, Mac Air Group, Martins Point Healthcare, Shaw Brothers Construction, St. Croix Tissue, Woodlands Pulp and Paper, and our friends, Albin, Randall, and Bennett, Baker, Newman, and Noyes, Bangor Savings Bank, CBRE, the Boulos Company, Clark Insurance, R.M. Davis, Hughes Company, J.B. Brown & Sons, LaBelle and Harriman, Maine Community Foundation, Malone Commercial Brokers, Pierce Atwood, Scott Dugas Trucking and Excavating, the Singer, Roberge, and Hawkins Group at Merrill Lynch, Summit Natural Gas, Systems Engineering, and the University of Maine Law School. You had to listen to that long list because the Chinkets have so many generous friends, so thank you to our sponsors. The proceeds that we generate from tonight's event will support Maine Historical Society's statewide celebration of Maine's bicentennial in 2020. These efforts, well and underway, include empowering more than 270 local Maine organizations to share their stories online through our nationally recognized online digital museum, the Maine Memory Network. It's a spectacular program, and your support and your participation is going to help carry that forward. I'd like to start by giving you just some brief background about the Maine History Maker Award and where it fits into our program. Maine Historical Society was founded in 1822, just after Maine became a state. We have been working to preserve, document, and study Maine history ever since. We believe that history has a unique and really essential role to play in Maine. Only part of what we do is to look backwards. We also provide context and perspective that helps Mainers understand the issues that shape their lives today. That's why we think the bicentennial of statehood in 2020 is such an important strategic opportunity for Maine. In part, the bicentennial will be a moment to celebrate all the things that makes Maine such a special place. But the bicentennial also provides a focal point for the critical work we have before us, building the state's economy and preparing Maine to thrive for the next century. The stories that we collect and share don't just reflect Maine's past, they provide guidance, inspiration, and invaluable examples of what it takes to build and sustain strong communities. Our bicentennial programs will engage communities throughout Maine in exploring, sharing, and learning from their past. We will capture the stories of the individuals, families, and communities that built Maine. We will help Mainers explore how and why specific businesses and industries emerged and thrived, and how they evolved over time. What it meant to make paper in Millinocket, to make shoes in Dexter, to can sardines in Eastport, to make carriage blankets in Sanford, to farm potatoes in the county, and yes, to build bridges out of Pittsfield. We will celebrate the diverse people who worked in these industries, where they came from, and the lives and communities they built. Through the bicentennial, MHS will gather, celebrate, and draw on just the kind of stories and perspectives that you're going to hear tonight. So thank you very much for supporting that. So thank you for being here. Maine Historical Society created the Maine History Maker Award in 2013 to illustrate the continuity that we see between Maine's past, present, and future. In particular, we want to illustrate the fact that the actions we each take matter. The History Maker Award honors contemporary citizens who are shaping life in Maine today. Past recipients include Mert Henry, Vin Verino, the Mills family, and Mary Bonato. Before we present this award, we want to start by giving you an overview of the Chinket story. Now, I know that many of you know some, if not all, of the Chinkets. It's a big, sprawling story that goes in many directions. So, to help you, we have created a genealogical cheat sheet. This is our roadmap, and we'll keep coming back to it, and I've been studying it and building it for the last few weeks. And I'll hold it together for at least a couple more hours. The basic frame of the story is this. Ralph and Edna Cianchette had 7 children, 6 boys and 1 girl. The History Maker Award recognizes the contributions that Ralph and Edna's direct descendants have made. Cinquettes have been part of all aspects of life for more than 100 years, business, community, and public service. They have led industries, served in the legislature and town governments, helped build local governments and schools, and served on numerous boards, including MCI, Maine Maritime Academy, and Sebasticook Valley Hospital. Like virtually all Maine stories, this is an immigrant story. Raphael Chinket left Italy on his own in 1906 and came to Maine to pursue opportunity here, specifically the construction of a rail line from Presque Isle to Ashland. His father, Dominic, was already here. When the work in the county was complete, the family gravitated to and settled in Pittsfield. There, Ralph met Edna Steen, a Baptist and a Yankee, and they married in 1918. Ralph's mother, Conchetta, brothers, and other relatives soon arrived and quickly established an extended network of family support and collaboration. This was a period of heavy Italian immigration to Maine. As the paper and textile industries grew, Italian immigrants played a key role in constructing new state-of-the-art mills across Maine. During the 1920s and 30s, Ralph and Edna had their children and raised their family in and around Pittsfield. Ralph built a successful construction business, erecting bridges around the state. The boys helped him and hustled, looking for opportunities and dollars of their own, raising chickens, corn, and delivering newspapers. That would be Chuck on the donkey. Pittsfield provided good opportunities. As the pamphlet from 1907 suggests, Pittsfield was a good place to live and locate your factory. Among other characteristics, it's a fully up-to-date town. It's cheap electric power and has a good class of businessmen. The children all attended Maine Central Institute. The family farm was the center of gravity, and there was extended family nearby. By the time World War II got underway, 5 of the sons were of military age and served. Carl served in the Merchant Marine. Norris, Claire, Ken, and Bud served in the Army in Europe. Chuck would later serve in Korea. After the war, the story picks up. The brothers settled back in the Pittsfield area and focused on making livings and starting families. Carl formed Carl E. Chinket, Inc. in 1946 with Ralph's old equipment and funds loaned to him by Ken and Bud, their Army savings. In 1949, Chinket Brothers, Inc. was formed. Norris and Claire worked for the company briefly before pursuing other careers. I've got to pause and say Ken is here, so I feel like I will be intimately fact-checked for anything I get right or wrong, so I hope I'm doing okay. The brothers hustled with each job, built capacity, smarts, and confidence in the reputation of the company. Major jobs in the first decades included the Mezzalonsky Stream Bridge, the Kendaskiag project in Bangor, and the Telstar Earth Station. The brothers took on challenging projects and consistently completed jobs under time and under budget. Carl and Ken would leave and come back to the business, but the 4 brothers formed a strong nucleus. The family motto was, "Us and Company." During the 60s and 70s, the company continued to grow. It built some of the most iconic projects in Maine, including the Piscataqua River Bridge, and helped build the infrastructure that supported Maine's economy, including paper mills and power plants. Chinbro also undertook major projects along the eastern seaboard. In 1970, the company's name was changed to Chinbro to reflect and support the company's corporate expansion. In 1980, the brothers transferred ownership to the employees, recognizing, as they always had, that the Cianbro people were the company's most important asset. Cianbro is now one of the United States' largest and most diverse construction companies, 30th largest in the United States. Cianbro operates in more than 40 states and employs over 4,000 team members, all from its headquarters, which remains in Pittsfield. They've remained committed to Maine. And just this week, we may have all seen the news of Cianbro's innovative work on the Sarah Mildred Long Bridge, which is connecting Portsmouth to Kittery, and its innovative use of the tides to install those spans. Pretty neat. So, let's get back to the family. We can't recognize everyone in the family individually or adequately, but I do want to briefly recognize each of Ralph and Edna's children's family. So, back to our cheat sheet. 4 brothers spent all or much of their careers working for Cianbro: Carl, Ken, Bud, and Chuck. Each had his particular role, which emerged naturally over time. Carl was the eldest and first Chinket brother to go into the construction business. He had worked with Ralph before the war. In 1962, he left to focus on the concrete business, which was eventually brought back into the Cianbro fold. Carl and Maureen had Janice, Brian, Carl, Malcolm, Jill, and Stephen. As I said, Kenneth is in the room, so for the most part, I'm going to let him speak for himself. Ken was known as the innovator and solved seemingly insolvable construction challenges, like how to replace the deck on the Woodrow Wilson Bridge in Washington along one of the most heavily trafficked routes in the country. Even now, I see some of the photographs of the different jobs and get traumatized by some of the things they were confronting. Kenneth and Eveline had Eric, Jane, Joe, John, Ann, and Jean. After Eveline passed away, Ken married Lucette. Ken served as selectman, councilman, and in other civic roles in Pittsfield. Bud was the numbers guy, the negotiator, and extended Cianbro's national reach and reputation. He served as president of the Associated General Contractors of America, the membership trade group that leads the construction industry nationally. It's under that guise that we see him here with President Ronald Reagan. Bud and Priscilla had Thomas, Earl, Susan, Mark, and Peter. Bud served as president of Cianbro from 1962 to 79 and as chairman from 1979 to 1991. Chuck was known as the company's people guy and troubleshooter. Chuck and Ellen had Tamara, Lynn, Andrea, and Charles. Chuck served as Cianbro's president from 1979 to 1990, then as its chairman. He also served as a Maine state senator for 4 terms in the 70s and 90s. And this, the Meslonsky Stream Bridge, I understood was the make or break point for the company, perhaps, and they figured it out and it all took off from there. But Cianbro wasn't the only place where the action was. So let's look at some of the other lines. Norris and Marilyn had Scott, Rocky, and Candace. After helping start Cianbro, Norris left to open a branch of Chadwick Bayross in Caribou, and Bob Bayross is with us this evening. In the 60s, Cianbro brought Maine Fence and asked Norris to run the company. After several years, he purchased Maine Fence and ran it until the 80s when his son Rocky took over. Maine Fence has evolved constantly. As the interstate highway system was built in Maine, Maine Line installed the majority of the guardrail on the Maine Turnpike and I-295. During the 70s and 80s, Maine Line did major chain link installations around huge paper mills like SD Warren and major security projects around Brunswick Naval Air Station and the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. Nicknamed Bull, Claire was an outstanding athlete who played football at the University of Maine. Claire met Ethel Mae Morrison in the summer of 1947. Ethel was from a family of 10 children from Millinocket, where her father was a foreman at Great Northern Paper. Claire and Ethel had Melissa, Daniel, Richard, Elizabeth, and Robert. Claire was an attorney who graduated magna cum laude from Portland University Law School in 1951. He was the first member of the family to serve in the Maine state legislature. He was elected state representative from 1953 to 54 when he was only 29 years old. I love this particular, this photo in particular in the almost top right corner. It's a group of Pittsburgh business leaders in around 1954, and the woolen mill was getting ready to close, and they were coming together, the business leaders, to try to figure out first how to save the plant, and then after that, how they could attract electronics factory that came in and then I think thrived there until very recently. So, you know, civic leadership is happening right there. For decades, Ethel ran a daycare that many children in the Pittsfield area have attended. Now, Andrea, I'm not sure if you're in that photograph or one of the other ones that we have. Marilyn's story is one no less about hustle, opportunity, and community. Marilyn married Linwood Pelletier in 1948, and together they built their life in the Cornish area. They had Patricia, Margaret, Dennis, and Barbara. Linwood owned and operated Pelletier's funeral home, which is pictured there. Marilyn worked for the Postal Service, started charitable clubs, and was particularly focused on helping the needy. Linwood and Marilyn used their hearse as a rescue unit before there was an ambulance in the area and saved many lives in the process. Many Chinkettes have had interest in horses. I particularly love this photo of Linmar Willie, the trotter, which was named for both Linwood and Maryland, which was taken at Bangor Raceway in the 1980s. The reason we are here tonight, though, is because the spirit, values, and work ethic and commitment to Maine demonstrated by Ralph and Edna is alive, well, and being carried forward by their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. In their own contemporary ways, those kids are finding forward-looking opportunities to contribute to Maine. Again, we can only give you a very brief flavor of the things that the current generations are doing, and I hate to not reference what everybody's doing. So, for example, Jason Chinket has described himself as a serial entrepreneur. He's focused on developing technology companies and ensuring that Maine is well represented in the digital economy. Peter Chinket currently serves as CEO of Chinbro's subsidiary StarCon. He previously served in the Maine legislature, was a gubernatorial candidate, and was appointed ambassador to Costa Rica by President George W. Bush. Andrea Maker is founder and co-chair of Focus Maine, an initiative by Maine business leaders to grow Maine's economy by focusing on areas where we have competitive advantages, including agriculture, aquaculture, and biopharmaceuticals. Michael Chinket was the chief counsel to Governor Paul LePage from 2012 to 13. A Navy reservist, he was deployed to Afghanistan from 2013 to 14 as a trainer and advisor to the Afghan National Police. He works for the family's business, writes a blog for the Bangor Daily News, and serves on the board of the Maine Turnpike Authority. And we even have an historian in the mix. Just last week, Alex Koch took first place in this year's National Collegiate Book Collecting Contest presented by the Library of Congress in Washington. This is the kind of innovation, continuity, and leadership that will ensure Maine's vitality as we enter our third century. At this point, I'd like Ken and Michael to join me on stage. Members of the Chinket family have been leading by example for more than 100 years and continue to do so today. For your contributions to Maine, the Maine Historical Society thanks you and is pleased to present your family with the 2017 Maine History Maker Award. Okay, you've heard enough of me talking about the family. The rest of the program is dedicated to hearing from the Chinkettes. So what we're going to do for about the next 15 minutes or so is Michael and his grandfather, Kenneth, are going to have a conversation and share some memories and share some stories. So we're happy to have Michael and Ken with us.
All right, well, thanks, Steve, and thanks, everyone, for being here. So for those who don't know, Ken has gone by a lot of names over the years. He's been Ken, he's been Dad, he's been Grampy, he's been Lunk. And for some of his grandchildren, he's been Papa, so that's what I'll be calling him tonight. And as the remaining patriarch of the family, he's kind of the repository of knowledge and has a lot of stories. I know that many of us have heard over the years, some later into the evening than others, but he wanted to share some tonight and talk about who the Chinkettes are, where his father came from, where his brothers and sister made a mark on Maine, and hopefully what all of us will continue to go do in the future. So with that, Papa, I know your dad came over from Italy all by his lonesome and had quite an experience coming into Boston.
Well, that's true. His father was in the country first. Had been brought over with a group of people to be laborers to build a railroad up into Aroostook County, and his father was working on that railroad. So he came over to catch up with his father, and he got into Boston, and there was no one there to meet him. And he was, young man. He couldn't speak any English, and there was no one there to meet him, so they didn't know what to do with him. They put him in a jail cell to keep him until someone came to claim him. He didn't like that because the jail who had cockroaches and things, and it was a bad experience for him. He never forgot that.
No, that's right. And then he came up to Maine and worked with some family members and settled in Pittsfield and taught himself as a mechanic.
Well, he started out, of course, in farming, and he came a farm just outside Pittsfield Village. And while he was on the farm, he found an old junk automobile, and he took it all apart and put it back together, and was kind of self-taught as a mechanic. And so he was always a very, very competent mechanic. He got in a business with another partner afterwards, and they ran a garage in back of the hotel in Pittsfield, and he became known as the guy who could fix your car if nobody else knew how. It was a natural mechanic, so he did that for a while, but he was very good as a mechanic. He could fix most anything.
Yeah, and then he obviously met Marmee, Edna, got married, and I remember, one thing Chinkettes are known for better or worse, can be stubborn from time to time, and he and Ralph took a bet from two gentlemen that he had to carry a few things home, and they thought he couldn't, and he thought otherwise.
Well, that's true. He was hanging out with a bunch of his cronies there in the garage in back of the hotel, and was a partner in there. The people salesmen used to come there, stay in the hotel and put their car in that garage, and if there was anything wrong with it, they'd ask them to see if they could fix the car while they're staying in the hotel. So my father used to be called on to fix all kinds of problems that they might have with an automobile. Mostly it was a matter of retuning the carburetor or something, something that he was very good at anyway. And so they did that for a while and got into different businesses with his partner and so forth. They were putting in oil burners in people's houses in place of the wood burning things, and then they were selling the heating oil. It did many things, to keep busy, and he got back into building bridges finally, and something he really wanted to do. And so he bid to build small bridges around Maine, and he was successful. Built several of them, and enjoyed doing that. And my brothers and I, as we grew old enough, we went to work for him on one of the bridges he was building, and so it started us all in the bridge business, really.
Yeah, and then, as you said, you had 5 brothers, not all of which went into the construction business. Claire, or Bull, he was more of an athlete and went to the University of Maine.
Well, I had 5 brothers. They were all special in one way or another. They were all a little different, but my brother Claire was a couple of years older than me. He went to law school and got a law degree, and before that he went to University of Maine. He went there as a freshman, and they had a tradition there, and they had an intramural track meet between the freshmen and the varsity team, and they had a tradition. They made the freshmen wear this stupid-looking beanie, which humiliated them some. So they had a tradition: if the freshmen could beat the varsity at the track meet, they wouldn't have to wear the beanie anymore. And my brother took 3 first place against the varsity, and they didn't have to wear the beanie anymore that year.
That was pretty good. And then all of the brothers had served in the military at various times.
Oh, yeah, during the war, there were 5 of us that were in the military during World War II. My father made a little plaque, nailed it up in the front of the house there with 5 blue stars on it. Fortunately, we never had to have a gold star. So,
yeah, well, and while you were overseas, you were a pretty good card player, from what I hear.
well, after the war ended, I'm stuck in the Army of Occupation, and not much to do. So I learned how to make money. I probably wasn't exactly 100% legal, but the money that they paid us was in this. It looked like monopoly money. They called it script or something, but they used to. I had a lot of it, and I used to play blackjack, and I was quite successful at playing blackjack. So I usually wound up making all the money there was on the table, and I used to keep it in my wall locker, and people used to joke that I had to carry my toothbrush with me. My wall locker's full of money. But you had trouble sending the money home. They tried to keep you from sending too much money home because they were trying to stop black marketing and that sort of thing. So anyway, in order to send the money home, I'd have to get somebody to make out a money order for $50, $75, $100, something, make it out to my mother. And if they make out a money order for $100 to my mother, I'd give them $200 in that money that we had there. It was, my mother was getting money orders from people she never heard of. So she just put it in the bank for me. So when I got back from the Army, I had money in the bank.
Well, that's a good thing to have.
Yeah, I thought so. My brother Carl was the oldest in the family, trying to get started in the construction business, and of course he needed equipment, and construction equipment is very expensive. I loaned him what money I had saved up in the bank there, and so that he could buy some equipment to start in the construction business. Later on, I got going to turn that into shares in the business. So that's how I got started as an owner in the construction business.
Yeah. And as the business grew, and Steve alluded to it, you know, some people wanted to build roads and some didn't.
Well, that's true. I think my oldest brother Carl had worked for actually J.R. Chinket, who was building roads all over Maine, and he had worked for him as a superintendent. So he naturally thought we ought to be building roads, and I thought that we didn't have the proper equipment. We couldn't afford to buy the proper equipment to be competitive in a road business. So I started pushing to build bridges, and we were being fairly successful at building the bridges, and we never would have been in the road business because it requires too much money for equipment.
Well, and at one point you actually left the company because
Well, my brother Carl insisted that he thought, because he had worked as a superintendent on the road construction, he thought that's what we ought to be doing. And so I said, well, if that's what you want to do, you go ahead and you do what you want to do. I'm going to do something different. And so I left the company, what stock I owned and so forth. I had I call it a spin-off or something, and I took my share of the company or something, started building bridges. So my father had been building bridges around the state of Maine, and I, in fact, had worked for him on the bridge before I went in the Army. And so from then on, I was in the bridge building business, and worked out pretty well for me.
Well, and you were looking at a job up to Bangor, and someone pulled papers right after you, I believe.
Well, I was there was a big project in downtown Bangor, and now it exists there as a couple of large parking lots right in the center of Bangor. The place there that was mostly water, and they decided to build parking lots there, and it had to build a couple of large retaining walls in order to narrow up the stream and make room for a couple of parking lots in the center of Bangor. They still exist there, so it was a big project for us, and we managed to be low bidder, and I took charge of the project and got it done fairly successfully.
Yeah, and that's when you brought Ken Chinket Incorporated back into Chinket Brothers.
Well, yeah, but right. I had started my own company, but we decided that, you know, we were both interested. My brother Carl and I were both interested in that project, and so when I found out that he was interested in it, I said, well, you know, if we were interested in the same thing, we should be doing it together. And so then we came back together, and from then on, it was Chinket Brothers.
Yep. No, it's a great thing. And as you guys came back together, you know, you guys were always creative when it came to solving jobs. I know there was a pipe crossing you were doing over some canals. That was going to be a long job, and you found a better way to do it.
Well, I remember that one. That was the job that my brother Chuck was interested in. He got the thing lined up, and they wanted to put these pipe crossings across all these canals. And at times of the day, the water was high in those canals, and the pipe had to be put together in the dry. So building cofferdams, high cofferdams across those streams would have been extremely expensive and time-consuming. So we decided that we found out that that they naturally had the water drawn down at certain times for a weekend or something. And so we decided, well, let's do the pipe job while the water's down, like on weekends or something. And so we arranged it that way so that we got the whole job done that way without building cofferdams, and saved us quite a lot of money.
Well, and you know, I know you always say you were fortunate to have 5 brothers, and they were all unique in their own way.
Well, that's very true. I considered myself very, very fortunate to have 5 brothers, and we were all different. We're all unique, some way or other, special aptitudes or something. But there's no substitute for having 5 brothers and working together.
Hear, hear. And I know, as you guys considered looking at turning Cianbro into an employee-owned company, there was a gentleman from Texas who I believe accused you of being a socialist. Does that sound familiar?
We've been called a lot of names.
But you had a pretty good answer to him, if I recall.
No, we really decided that the people that work for the company should all share in whatever success the company had. And so we decided to form, at that time, they had this thing as an employee stock ownership program, right? And we started that program. It was a national program. We started it so that all the employees actually, while they're working for the company, they own stock in the company. And if the company made money, they made money off of that. So the company profits accrued to the employees.
So, no, that's
It kept the employees interested in being members of the company.
yeah. So as we come to a close, and I know we have to keep the program moving, having seen this presentation, seeing all these folks here tonight, what do you want them to know about you and your brothers and your parents, and what's their charge to make Maine better?
I don't know. I don't like boasting about anybody, but there's no question my father and mother were exceptional people, and my mother was chosen by the church to be Maine Mother of the Year, and she went to Washington. They sent her to Washington, D.C. as represent the state of Maine as the Maine Mother of the Year. And she was, I remember she got there, she was the runner-up to John Glenn's mother. I think John Glenn's mother had a little more political pull.
Well, that's probably right. Oh, good. Are there any other stories you want to tell?
No, I don't know. I think I was very fortunate to be brought up with 5 brothers, 1 sister, and we all worked well together. We helped each other out and so forth, and it was something that just happens, and it's just a matter of good luck that that it worked out that way. My father was very much family oriented. Anyway, he liked to get us all to work together. He said we should all work together. He says we should be us and company.
Yeah.
That's the way he explained it. But he really wanted us to work together as a family.
Oh, good. Well, it's probably good advice, and it's something certainly I know, and I'm sure I speak for everyone here, can learn from, and hopefully it'll make Maine great by the next bicentennial. So thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken and Michael. For the next part of our program, I'd like to welcome Cindy Williams up, who's our very own news anchor from WCSH, an award-winning news anchor and an important part of our community, who's going to lead a panel discussion amongst Michael, Jason Chinket, and Andrea Maker to really dive a little deeper about what does it mean to grow up in this family and what are our visions for Maine going forward by some of these folks who are very actively involved in that. So, to you, Cindy. Thank you.
Don't be shy. Come on up. There we go. I'll let you take the featured seats here, guys. Don't be shy. You know, I look at the family tree and I keep looking at Marilyn. Poor Marilyn. 6 brothers? You didn't torture Marilyn at all growing up, did you, Ken? No, maybe a little. Maybe a little. Guys, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Let's start out talking about Ralph and Edna. You knew your grandparents, Andrea.
Yes.
When people talk about them, and it comes up over and over and over again, everybody describes them as remarkable parents. What made them remarkable?
Well, you heard what Kenneth said about how they encouraged their kids to work together, and I think that is fairly remarkable. I think, that Grandpa came over from Italy when he was 11 years old on that boat by himself.
11.
Just remarkable that he withstood that journey and turned into the person he was. One of the things that stood out for me that I think was reinforced through my own parents, through my uncles and aunts, was not only did they work hard to support their families, they also worked hard to give back to the culture and the community that gave them these opportunities. So as I recall the story about Grandpa, he didn't have a lot of fondness for the country of Italy. That was not an easy place for them to live at the time. And they came here for hope and opportunity, and he found it, and he felt very strongly about giving back to make the community a better place.
Can I just see a show of hands as to how many Chinkets are in the room? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That's impressive. Another show of hands as to how many of you spent any significant time in Pittsfield. Oh yeah. So that brings me to my next question. Your family, and this is unusual in today's world, that a family grows up in one's area, and many of you stayed in that area. What do you think that did for the Chinkets as a family? Let's start with you, Michael.
I mean, for me, it's, I'm a homebody. My wife's from Western Massachusetts originally, but she came back, so that was pretty good. But
Nice of her.
it was. But one of the great things about Maine, and I know, I spent some time in Pittsfield when I was little with my grandmother and grandfather. But I grew up in this area. But they always called it Pittsfield, USA. And it was this community and this network that everyone looked out for one another. And while it's different, Maine as a whole has that. We're 1.3 million people. We're not that big in the grand scheme of things. And look out across the room tonight. For those I'm not related to, I probably still have some connection. And if you go far enough back, we probably are related somehow. But for me, it's that connection, that community. People aren't always going to agree on everything, as we heard my grandfather. sometimes he didn't agree with his brothers, but if everyone's rowing in the right direction, you can do a lot of great things.
What do you think, Jason?
Well, I think a lot of people talk about how Maine is a small town, and so I hear people who are, from away who move here and they feel that way. Growing up here as a fourth-generation Mainer from a big family that's well known, it's an even smaller town. And one thought I remembered is working for my dad's company. I had to drive a dump truck one day and get a load of sand. I must have been like 17 years old, and so I went and got the load of sand, filled it up higher than you're supposed to, and then drove back, not really knowing what you're supposed to do, and I guess along the way, blowing dust off the back. And by the time I got back, my dad told me, you're supposed to cover that. And a number of people had called him and told him about his son driving down the road with a dump truck full of sand going all over. So for me and for us, it's a very small town.
So, in other words, there was no getting away with
getting away with
anything.
anything.
Right. And Andrea, I know you feel very strongly about this, about that sense of community, and what kept your family so close, being all in that same area, or most of them in that same area.
Certainly it was the hub, the fact that the brothers worked together kept many of us in the town of Pittsfield. And we always had an annual family reunion, so the rest of the cousins, whether they were up in Aroostook County or over in Cornish, would join us at least once a year at usually Mac's camp. It was Uncle Carl's camp at the time, for family reunion. When we were younger, it was Uncle Lunk's camp over in Unity. But that was always a very special occasion, and I particularly enjoyed Uncle Lenny, and we called her Annie Chink, Marilyn, Annie Chink, I think that was from Chinket. They always came in. I was always impressed that Uncle Lenny knew everything about what we were each doing. So even though they didn't live in town with us, they still were very connected to our family, and that family reunion kept it there. And I just want to say to my cousins who don't typically come to Portland to see us, welcome to Portland. It's really fun to see so many cousins in this part of the state. We haven't done a family reunion down here. This sort of feels like one.
Interesting too, many of the Cianbro workers must have lived in that area, the initial, company. A huge part of that sense of community and giving back must have come from living in the same community as the people you employ. It's such a generous thing to have established that kind of profit-sharing plan with the workers. Yeah?
Yeah, I think that's right. You heard my grandfather, it was making sure you take care of the people, and this isn't a story he told, but he's told me before how he lives in North Yarmouth now, and a gentleman a few years back came and knocked on his door, said, Mr. Chinket, I'm so-and-so, and he lived up in the Rockland area. And he said, I've worked for Cianbro for a long time, and I remember when you and your brothers came around and said, if you stick with the program, you'll be able to retire with $1 million. And I thought you were any number of names. But he said, Mr. Chinket, I just wanted to say, I've just retired from Cianbro, and I have $1.2 million in my profit-sharing account. So
wow.
It's, it speaks volumes to what they did.
Truly. You must have heard many, many stories, had your name mispronounced many, many times. But what are some of your favorite, remembrances, especially you, Andrea, from Pittsfield and growing up in that area, and how your family was regarded in that area?
I didn't really know how my family was regarded until I got out of Pittsfield. I mean, it was just Pittsfield. It was all people, whether you were a Chinket or not. We were a community. It was when I went all the way to New Hampshire to college, but then came back here to law school to Portland and started meeting people who knew my family and started hearing about how highly regarded my family was. It wasn't something that was that noticeable to me growing up in Pittsfield. What I loved about growing up in Pittsfield was the freedom that I had to just jump on my bicycle or walk out the door and go to any number of houses. Al and Mary Alice Bancroft are here tonight. They were sort of my second home. When I was young, I would go over there after school, and I understand Mary Alice would call my mother and say, Helen, just want you to know, Andy's here. So there was certainly a sense of security growing up in that town, and I actually think that's true in a lot of Maine communities. My own children in the North Yarmouth, Cumberland area, I think enjoyed that same sense of freedom, so maybe that's Maine.
The company is synonymous with Chinket. I mean, I'm sure you hear it all the time. People probably assume you work with Cianbro just being a Chinket, but each one of you decided to do something very, very different. And I think it's interesting because of the stories that you hear about Ralph and Edna and how they encouraged entrepreneurship in their kids. Did that continue with your generation? Because you're doing so many interesting things and so many of them businesses that you've started.
Yeah,
All right. Innovator extraordinaire over here.
I think so. You know, it gave us a really high bar to live up to, but I feel like I do a lot of things that my grandfather and his brothers would recognize. So most mornings I'm at work by 7 a.m., which for tech is extremely early. You know, that'd be like construction at 4 or 5. You know, I treat my employees well, like they do. When I sold my company, I shared some of the profits with them. One of the phrases that was really common at Cianbro was, none of us are as smart as all of us, and we live that at my company. One of the things I tried to do was bring together different people. And it was exciting when you'd have a Colby football player, a Bowdoin mathematician, and a UMaine marketer all together in a room working on the same problem. You know, we extended that all the way to everyone received, you know, bonuses based only on his group. We never, even when the company was fairly successful, we never had individual bonuses. It was only a group bonus because we would all succeed or we wouldn't.
Yeah, you know, that's, you know, Jason's starting a lot of companies. I have the good fortune to work for one my dad started because that entrepreneurial spirit kind of does flow through. And, you know, one of the things, you know, I personally take great pride and you know, a healthy dose of fear every day is that, you know, there's 200 families that work for the companies we're responsible for, and that's 200 paychecks, 200 mortgages, you know, 200 grocery bills, all those things, you know, that people use to make a life. And, you know, one of the things that I'm certainly proud of, and I had very little to do with it, but Eric, my father, when he started the Regency, you know, he always made sure taking care of the people was very important. And, you know, if you come into the Regency, you'll see a lot of our people have been there for 25 plus years. Actually, our accounting manager and our HR manager, they hit 25 years this year. They both started when they were 19 years old as maids, and they've been with the company all along. And it's a, you know, it's a credit to that kind of what Ralph and Edna did, what the brothers and Ani Chink did, you know, what my dad has instilled. That, you know, you carry those values forward and you can make a huge difference in Maine. And that's not a Chinket story. You know, Hussies are doing it, Hancocks are doing it with lumber, Smiths are doing it with broccoli and potatoes. There's countless stories like that throughout the state, and that's one of the things that makes Maine great.
Wonderful. And Andrea, in working with all of these businesses, encouraging that in the state of Maine, you must really try and foster those same values.
So I do. I recently was on this stage doing a Maine Live talk for 12 minutes, and it was really about the sense of giving back. And as I was approaching my 50s, I was feeling that I was failing because I wasn't giving back. I had my own profession, happily married. We were raising 4 terrific children, but I wasn't doing that giving back piece. And as my children went off to college and the space opened up, I thought now is my time. So I knew I wanted to create jobs. I knew that I wouldn't be the business owner creating those jobs. I'm more of a professional in a law firm. But I did create an initiative that's now known as Focus Maine that is designed to accelerate the growth of jobs in some sectors in Maine that have been identified as sectors that have high potential for accelerated job growth. And there's a group of business leaders involved in Focus Maine who worked on the research and the planning of this. We now have strategies that have contracted with a number of Maine organizations to help companies in the food sector grow, both agriculture and agriculture, to try to lure some biopharmaceutical manufacturing up out of Boston, and also to help grow Maine's knowledge worker capacity, so trying to attract people to come into Maine to work in all the businesses across the state. So that's innovation in terms of trying to put an initiative together that might help spur Maine's economy forward, not by creating a business, but by helping businesses that are in some high potential sectors.
The Chinket family has got to be the #1 family for creating jobs in the state of Maine, when you think about it. And like you said, Michael, if you hire someone, you are providing for an entire family. So especially when you think of it that way, it's huge. Somebody also described you as a family of doers, which I really, really like. So that brings us to the next question. What's next for Maine? What's next for jobs in Maine? Who wants to take that hot potato?
I think for me, Andrew's been working on what our competitive advantage is as a state and how can we leverage that. And to me, one large competitive advantage is our quality of life. You know, we have an exceptional place. I moved here from Boston to raise my children. Our oldest son's right in the front row. And we can provide a life for him and his siblings that he'd like to forget. Really, you know, it would be unparalleled
Right.
anywhere else. And so I think that is our big chip to play. I know a lot of knowledge workers, these people who work for Google, Yahoo, who can work anywhere in the world. They can work in Brazil or Palo Alto or New York, and they choose here. And they, you know, especially the smart ones, bring a San Francisco salary, which they reinvest here. And so I think that's a huge opportunity, and that's something I try to, you know, foment as much as I can, is how to bring those workers here, how to create an environment that is attractive to them, and how to keep them.
What do you think, Andrea?
Well, what I'm trying to do with Focus Maine, with the team I'm working with there, is create a model of how, you know, if we can really apply the resources we have to accelerate the growth of jobs in the sectors we've identified, and in 3 or 4 years we recognize that works, then let's look at a couple of other sectors and do the same thing there. We're helping businesses get coaching so they can get to the next level of size. We're helping them connect to investment. We're helping do value chain initiatives, analyses to decide, you know, what's holding this sector back from growth? Is it transportation? Is it a storage building that's needed? Let's figure out what that is and get that in place to unlock the potential of the sector there. If we can learn how to grow businesses and sectors that way, then we can expand it to other sectors as well. Maine has we have a lot going for us, and the people I know who have moved to Maine to work here are thrilled to live in this quality of life, as Jason was saying. And they're coming from all over the country. They're tired of congestion, traffic, and taking hours to get to work. They love stepping outside the door and into a kayak or putting on their hiking boots and within 2 hours being in some terrific mountains. And as we spread that word, and there are more and more ways for us now to spread that word, I think we'll see more people coming into Maine and helping. I mean, our population projections right now are pretty dismal for the state of Maine. So we need to bring more people in, as well as work with the people who are here to help them gain more skills so that they can contribute more in the fields that they're in.
Yeah, and I mean, going off of that, and they're both absolutely right on that. But you know, one of the great things about Maine, and we saw it tonight when they went through this list, you know, Us and Company is certainly what Ralph and Edna tried to impart in their sons and has tried to pass down. But it applies a lot bigger. You know, the Maine Historical Society exists because there's businesses that are growing and investing in part of this community, whether it's, you know, Scott Dugas, Shaw Brothers, Chinbro, you know, you can read them all. It's those businesses that grow, and again, we talk about community, we talk about that quality of place. You know, I recognize this is probably a friendly crowd, but business is good because business creates the resources to go do those things, and that's one of the, you know, I think, you know, from a challenge standpoint, that's one of the things, you know, we need to work on, and I think, you know, fortunately, again, there are a lot of those great stories about, you know, businesses that want to do things right. Chinbro, certainly chief among them, when it comes to taking care of people, says, you know what? Yes, it's an organization. Yes, we have to make a profit to do good things. But from that comes other good things. It's not just chasing a dollar today. It's how do we build something great for tomorrow.
Great. And if you need a storage facility or a bridge or something like that, I think we know a company that can take care of that. Let's open it up to questions. Anybody have any questions for these guys? And don't say what's for dinner at somebody's house. No questions? Really? All right. All right, I'll tell a couple of stories that I heard about you. Where's Eric? I just saw him. Eric, Bill Green was telling me how you got a bulldozer and went out and made the football field at Cheverus High School. Where is he? I heard him chuckling, which I just love. That's such a great story. Another story I heard that I thought was so typical, perhaps, of the innovative thinking of the brothers, the Chinket brothers. And Peter Vigu had actually told this story to Bill when he interviewed him several years ago. And it was they had suffered a loss, and somebody had been, there was an accident at one of the sites. And as a result of that, they developed a harness that was different than all of the other harnesses that would save lives, because the gentleman who was hurt was wearing a harness that it wound up hurting him. So they built a different kind of harness. They did not patent it for the very specific purpose of allowing other companies to jump in, patent it, and now they're used, these types of harnesses are used everywhere. Had you heard that story? I had not. I thought it was great.
No, that's a great story, and you know, Papa, you know, he didn't mention it, but he owns several patents to his name, because one of the challenges he always faced, you know, building bridges, setting pipe, was maneuvering those things. And when you have big steel beams on cranes, you get winds, you get people handling them, it can present some challenges, not to mention setting it, and they used to wrap chains around it and so forth. And he was, of the brothers, probably the tinkerer and natural engineer without formal education, and he has two patents, one for a beam grab and one for a pipe grab, that allows cranes to move I-beams and pipes, you know, and they become, you know, standard safety equipment. I think he was telling me, you know, a few years back in New York, you have to have two of them on each beam now. Wow. In order to make sure they maintain positive control. So, you know, that's the history, that's the heritage.
Those innovating.
Do it better.
Yeah.
Work smarter.
Love it.
Another innovation story I remember is just, I think all the brothers worked very hard, but they also played hard. And so I remember being at Samoset, which a number of them would come to each year, and somehow they had a suite upstairs. They collectively figured out how to get the lounge piano into their suite.
How did they do it?
It took a lot of innovation, but some other things.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Any other stories, Andrea? I know you've got some.
You know, Kenneth talked about the one where they went into, I think it was the city of Lowell, when they had all those canals that had to have these new pipes, and those 2 weeks of shutdown that the mills had drained the water, and so they set up 12 different stations to do those 12 pipes in those 2 weeks instead of doing them seriatim over the course of a year, having to do the cofferdams. And I know they had a major celebration when it was all over. It was 4th of July, right? So the workers missed the 4th of July celebration with their families. They did these pipes instead, but had a great celebration afterwards, and I'm sure were compensated for that holiday work. They also, when they did the Woodrow-Wilson Bridge, and that was mentioned, they had to have all lanes open during both rush hours of the day.
Oh, wow.
So they would go in with crews at night, and 2 crews would lift a section of the pavement that they were going to resurface, and then just lay down a temporary placement for the rush hour to go over. The other 2 crews would come in and lift those temporaries up and put down the permanent the next night. And that's how they did that bridge.
Wow.
And it was actually got a commendation from Congress, because so many people in Congress noticed how smoothly that project was going, and the traffic actually flowed during both rush hours, but the bridge was resurfaced, and that was just a very innovative way to go at the problem. And I'm sure Pete Vigu is full of stories that they're still doing today in innovation to get the job done, but get it done in a way that's different and smarter.
When people think of Cianbro, I think they think roads and bridges and buildings, fish dams, decommissioning nuclear power plants. I mean, that's part of it too, isn't it? Kind of reinventing yourself and always learning and innovating to stay with whatever is needed at the time.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, certainly that's true for Cianbro. It's true in any business. If you're not if you're standing still, you're going backwards. Because progress marches on. We talk about, you look at technology, and I know I was having this conversation with Eric and some others the other day about how, trying to forecast, future demand for hotel rooms and how you're using machine learning to do that, whereas before, I don't know, you throw a dart at the board and hope you're right. And it's, Jason's certainly at the vanguard of that, but it's, it's true in any business and certainly true for Cianbro.
Is Maine going to be a tech state one of these days?
It's getting there,
All right.
which is, we've had a number of big successes recently that, I don't know if they've got enough coverage, with CashStar and Certify and Bet's First Choice, all over $100 million tech companies.
Sure.
And, right in Portland, and we have more to come. And I think there is a lot of innovation, and I'm hoping it'll continue here.
Good. Maybe the next Silicon Valley.
Maybe.
You'll work on that, won't you? All right.
We don't want the congestion in Silicon Valley.
All right, last chance for questions, and we're going to call. Ah, yeah, we got one. All right, go.
So from the time I was born, I knew Lunk is Lunk. And I grew up in Pittsfield. I think it was in high school, somebody was arguing that there was a brother named Kenneth. And I said, all the brothers and all our names belong to Lunk. Where did Lunk come from?
You're asking the wrong guy.
He has no idea.
Yeah.
Anybody know? No?
Ann can tell
do
the
you
story.
Lumpkin?
Hey, Lunkhead.
Lunkhead.
I'll tell it. All right, I'm Lunk's daughter. Dad, tell me if I've got this wrong. Can you hear me? Dad? Can you hear me, Dad?
Hands over there.
So the way my mom said it, which she was Evie, it was an elderly neighbor that just used to say to him, Dad's kind of quiet, like of all the brothers, he's kind of big and quiet. And the guy would say, oh, you're just an old lunkhead. And it stuck, and then it just became Lunk. And but my mother never called him anything but Lunk. I mean, like, it was in a term of endearment. He's
she
Uncle
know it was
Lunk. Uncle Lunk to all the nieces and nephews. And I think that's where it was, an old neighbor. I think, was it Peggy? Yeah. So my cousin Peggy is verifying that information. She's a few years older than I am.
And my mother's Marilyn, the sister, and she always told us it was sharp for lunkhead.
Okay, there you go. There's confirmation from a second source. I love it. Lunkhead.
He said it was Louis the Greek.
Louis the Greek? You gotta like the lunkhead story better, though. That's just a good one. That's a fun
So
one.
that would be the lunkhead who went on to get several patents from his innovation. And my father was Chuck, and the story was that the headmaster of MCI said to Edna and Ralph that Chuck would never amount to anything.
Really? Really?
So it just goes to show you that it doesn't all happen at the time of high school, by the time of high school.
Thank goodness.
Yes, that's right.
And how about genealogically speaking? Your dad and grandfather,
Yeah, my grandfather would be Norris. Yeah.
Norris. Okay.
It's confusing. I feel like we need a little pocket.
You
chart
do. Well, the
everywhere.
slide wasn't big enough. And how about you, Michael?
So I'm Eric's son. I'm Ken's grandson.
Gotcha.
And it's I'm proud to be both.
It's a good name. It's a good family to be in.
Amen.
Thank you guys all for coming tonight.
Well, we want to maximize the Chinket hangout time we have, since we have a family reunion. We have the reception out here for a while. I just want to, again, thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for your sponsorship. And I want to thank the Chinket family for their fun and generosity. I have been immersed in this family and its genealogy and its connections for the last couple of weeks. And there could not be a more wonderful, graceful, easy to work with group, and it just kind of reinforces, I think, all we've learned in talking about Maine values, so we really appreciate it. Again, we'd like to invite all of the Chinkets down for a family photograph, and then our reception will be open till 8, so please hang out and spend time. Thank you so much for coming.